They called it the Auxiliary Imperial Court, but most species knew it by a simpler name, the place where arguments went to die. The court governed over 1,000 star systems, 3 major galactic trade routes, and at least one civilization that still thought gravity was optional. Its laws were old, dense, and treated as sacred. Entire wars had been avoided or started because of a single sentence spoken inside this chamber, which was why I was standing very still. The hall stretched impossibly wide, its crystalline arches glowing with soft, shifting colors that responded to emotional fluctuations. For the auxiliary, this was considered calming. For humans, it felt like standing inside a mood ring the size of a cathedral. An alien dignitary leaned toward me, all elongated limbs and glowing eyes, and whispered through clenched mandibles, "Human, you are breathing incorrectly." "I'm sorry?" I whispered back. "You are inhaling with enthusiasm. This is unsettling." I nodded and tried to breathe less. Across the chamber, the queen of the auxiliary dominion sat upon her elevated dais, motionless as a carved statue. Her presence alone silenced entire delegations. Even the translators seemed nervous around her, occasionally lagging as if afraid to misinterpret her words. An alien nearby, short, wide, and covered in ceremonial plating, clicked its tongue in irritation. "Why is the human here? They bring unpredictability." Another replied, "The council demanded a cultural observer. Apparently, humans specialize in feelings." Several eyes turned toward me. I raised a hand awkwardly. "We also specialize in snacks." That did not help. The queen finally spoke, her voice resonating through the hall like layered echoes of authority. "Proceed with the summit." Representatives stepped forward one by one, reciting trade figures, border adjustments, and diplomatic reassurances in voices so calm they bordered on artificial. The auxiliary prized composure. Emotion, to them, was something best handled privately or surgically removed. I was taking mental notes when I noticed movement near the throne. The princess. She was young by auxiliary standards, her bioluminescent markings faint and controlled, her posture perfectly trained. 2 attendants stood close, monitoring her neural output on discrete displays. One attendant whispered sharply, "Her focus is drifting." The other replied, "Correct it." I felt a strange sensation then, like being observed, not with eyes, but with curiosity. The princess tilted her head slightly. Her gaze met mine. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't curious in the way scientists observe specimens. It was confused, searching. I gave a polite nod. Big mistake. Her markings flickered. An attendant stiffened. That fluctuation, did you see that? The queen's eyes narrowed just enough to make several diplomats reconsider their life choices. The princess took one small step forward. I murmured to the alien beside me. "Is she allowed to do that?" The alien stared in horror. "She is absolutely not." The princess took another step. The court, which had ruled 1,000 stars with flawless discipline, collectively held its breath. And somewhere in the vast, ancient hall, where chaos was forbidden by law,
Something unpredictable began to move.
If you asked the Zilari, humans were a footnote. An interesting one, maybe. Loud, emotionally inefficient, prone to solving complex problems with duct tape and optimism, but ultimately insignificant on the galactic scale. Which was why no one had bothered to seat me anywhere important. I stood off to the side of the court, behind 2 layers of dignitaries and one extremely judgmental alien who smelled faintly of ozone and disapproval. My official title, Terran Cultural Liaison Tier 3, translated roughly to present but ignorable. That was the idea, anyway. A tall Zilari official turned toward me, eyes shimmering faintly. "Human," he said flatly. "Clarify your function." I observe and occasionally explain why humans clap at inappropriate moments. He processed this. Why would anyone strike their hands together during tragedy? "We call it encouragement," I said. "Sometimes it's also sarcasm." His eyes dimmed slightly. Disturbing. Across the chamber, negotiations continued with flawless efficiency. Borders shifted, resources were allocated. Entire moons changed ownership with less emotion than a human deciding what to eat for breakfast. The alien beside me muttered, "You see, this is how governance should function, no chaos." Right on cue, my stomach growled. The sound echoed far louder than it had any right to. Several heads snapped in my direction. "That was not an attack," I said quickly. "Just biology." An ambassador hissed, "Your internal systems are loud." "We're working on it. Evolution takes time." Despite their obvious discomfort, no one ordered me removed. Humans were tolerated in the court the way one tolerates background noise. Annoying, but ignorable. At least until the princess shifted again. I felt it before anyone spoke. A strange pressure at the back of my thoughts, like standing too close to someone who was thinking very loudly. I glanced up. She was looking at me again. Not just at me, through me. An attendant whispered urgently, "Her neural readings are unstable." Another replied, "Is the human doing something?" I wasn't. I was literally just standing there, thinking about how long it had been since I'd had coffee. The princess frowned slightly. Her markings pulsed. I muttered under my breath, "Okay, this is new." The alien next to me stiffened. "Human, are you projecting neural output?" "I don't even know how I'd do that on purpose. Half my thoughts are song lyrics." The princess took a hesitant step closer. The court noticed. Murmurs spread, soft, sharp, afraid. "The human is drawing her attention," someone whispered. "That is impossible. He has no status." I wanted to agree with them. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't a soldier. I wasn't even particularly important back home. I was the kind of person who got assigned to committees because I filled out forms correctly. I wasn't supposed to matter. But as the princess looked at me, really looked at me, I saw something unfamiliar in her eyes. Relief. And in a court that ruled 1,000 stars, that single human emotion suddenly felt more dangerous than any weapon. Zilari royal processions were mathematical. Every step was measured, every movement accounted for. Formation was not tradition, it was law. The princess's position beside the queen had been calculated to the millimeter, her distance from every being in the chamber carefully regulated by ancient algorithms that had never failed. Until now. One of the attendants leaned toward the other, panic barely contained. "She is shifting out of alignment." "That is not possible," the second replied. "Her path is locked.
The princess took another step forward. The floor beneath her glowed faintly, responding to her movement like it was confused by the decision. The crystalline arches overhead shimmered, their colors warping into anxious hues that no one liked to see. The queen's voice cut through the rising murmurs. "Princess." The word was not loud. It didn't need to be. The princess paused mid-step. For a moment, everyone relaxed. Then she continued walking. The court did not gasp. Zalari discipline prevented that. Instead, the air tightened, as if the room itself had realized something had gone terribly wrong. I leaned toward the alien beside me and whispered, "Is this still part of the ceremony?" Its eyes were wide. "This has never been part of anything." The princess moved with purpose now, her steps small but certain, her bioluminescent markings flickering faster with each pace. Each flicker sent ripples of unease through the chamber as systems recalibrated, unable to predict her trajectory. An official barked, "Activate containment protocols." Another snapped back, "Not yet. She has not crossed a forbidden boundary." "How close is too close?" someone demanded. They all turned to look at me. I straightened instinctively. "I would like to clarify," I said, "that I am deeply uncomfortable being the reference point here." The princess was almost halfway across the chamber. The queen stood. That alone should have stopped everything. Her attendants froze, unsure whether to intercept or obey standing orders. The queen's gaze was fixed on her daughter, not with anger, but with something far more alarming. Concern. "Return to position," the queen commanded. The princess stopped again. For one heartbeat, I thought she might listen. Then she looked at me and smiled. The effect was immediate. Her neural monitors spiked, alarms whispered through the court's communication lattice. Several ancient defense constructs activated halfway, being forcibly shut down. "She is smiling," an elder whispered. "That expression is uncontrolled." I raised both hands slowly, palms out. "I didn't do anything, I swear." The princess resumed walking. Faster now. An attendant shouted, "She is breaking formation." "No," another replied, voice shaking. "She is choosing one." The distance between us closed far too quickly. I could see the fine details of her markings now, patterns that shifted not with logic, but with emotion. Confusion. Curiosity. Something warmer. The alien beside me took a step back. "Human, do not move." "That was my plan," I whispered. The princess crossed the final boundary. Every law, every protocol, every assumption the Zalari had built their empire upon strained in that single moment. And as she reached out towards me, arms unfolding in a gesture no one had prepared for, the court that ruled 1,000 stars lost control of its future. The first alarm didn't sound, it felt. A deep vibration rolled through the hall, low and heavy, like the palace itself had flinched. The princess didn't slow down. She reached me before anyone could stop her, her movement smooth and unhesitating, as if the universe had finally aligned into something simple. One moment she was an imperial heir surrounded by centuries of protocol. The next, she collided gently into my chest and wrapped all 4 of her arms around me. Time fractured. The floor beneath us lit up in cascading patterns of crimson and gold. The crystalline arches overhead darkened, their calming hues replaced by sharp, warning tones that made several aliens recoil instinctively.
A voice thundered through the chamber, cold and automated. Unauthorized contact detected. I froze. Every instinct screamed, "Run," but my body refused to cooperate. The princess pressed her head against me, her grip firm, deliberate, like she was afraid I might vanish if she let go. "Containment level rising," another voice announced. "Threat classification unknown." "That is the human," an official shouted. "He has breached royal proximity." "I did not move," I said desperately. "She came to me." No one was listening. Energy barriers snapped into place around the chamber. Defense constructs unfolded from hidden alcoves, ancient and terrifying, their weapons charging with a sound that made my teeth vibrate. The alien beside me stumbled backward. "Human, you are triggering the palace defenses." "I am being hugged," I said weakly. "This is not normally considered hostile behavior where I'm from." The princess shifted slightly, tightening her arms. Her bioluminescent markings surged bright, pulsing erratically across her skin. The palace systems responded immediately, interpreting the spike as distress. "Neural instability detected in royal air," an attendant cried. "Emergency protocols engaged." The queen's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and commanding. "Stand down." Some systems obeyed. Others hesitated. The princess lifted her head and looked at me, eyes wide, not afraid, but overwhelmed. "You are loud," she whispered, the translator struggling to keep up. "But warm." I swallowed hard. "You okay?" She nodded once, still holding on. "Your mind does not close its doors." That made no sense. But around us, the palace was coming apart at the seams. Containment fields tightened, a targeting lattice briefly painted my vision red before flickering uncertainly. "Human," an elder demanded, "what are you doing to the princess?" "Existing, usually poorly." The queen stepped forward, defiance in every controlled movement. "Release him," she ordered her daughter. The princess did not obey. Instead, she leaned closer, her voice barely audible. "If I let go, it goes quiet again." That sentence did what no weapon ever had. It terrified the exalary. Because in that single, unintended embrace, the palace systems had done the unthinkable. They had detected something more dangerous than an enemy. They had detected change. The palace did not know what to do with a hug. That was the problem. Zilari systems were designed for invasions, assassinations, and diplomatic betrayals spanning centuries. They had protocols for plasma discharges, neural attacks, even probability-based rebellions. They had nothing for affection. "Time lock initiated," an automated voice announced, strained and uncertain. "Non-essential motion suspended." The effect was immediate. Several guards froze mid-step, one with a weapon half raised, another caught in the act of turning his head. Ripples of suspended energy shimmered through the air, locking secondary systems into stasis. The palace hadn't stopped time exactly, but it had slowed it enough to think. I wish it hadn't, because now everyone had time to stare. The princess was still holding me, forearms steady and deliberate. Her breathing was uneven,
her bioluminescent markings pulsing softly now, no longer frantic, almost calm. That alone unsettled the court. An elder whispered, voice barely moving through frozen air. "Her readings are stabilizing." Another replied, horrified, "That is not possible during a breach." I glanced down at her and spoke quietly. "You're supposed to let go, aren't you?" She nodded once. She didn't let go. "I am not in distress," she said, carefully choosing each word. "The palace thinks I am." "That happens to me a lot," I muttered. Her head tilted slightly. "Why does your voice vibrate like that?" "Nervous habit. Also fear." That earned a faint flicker of light across her markings, something dangerously close to amusement. Across the chamber, the queen stood perfectly still, her expression controlled, but her eyes sharp with calculation. She was watching not just the hug, but everything around it. The palace systems, the frozen officials, the data flooding in. "Human," she said slowly, her voice bypassing several layers of suspended protocol. "What is my daughter experiencing?" I swallowed. "I don't know, but if I had to guess, she's feeling things without filters." A ripple of unease spread. "That is unsafe," an official snapped. "Unregulated emotional exposure leads to instability." I shrugged helplessly. "It leads to being human." The princess looked up at her mother. "They do not silence their thoughts." The queen's gaze flickered. "That is inefficient." "Yes," the princess agreed, "but it is not empty." That word landed hard. Empty. The time lock systems faltered slightly, as if the palace itself was struggling with the implication. An attendant forced a shaky breath. "Your Majesty, if this contact continues, it may rewire her neural pathways." Silence followed. Then the queen spoke. "Then perhaps," she said carefully, "we must consider why a single moment of contact is capable of doing what centuries of control could not." The princess tightened her arms again, not out of fear, but certainty. "I do not want to return," she said softly. "Not yet." Frozen officials listened. Frozen systems calculated. And for the first time in Zalari history, forbidden contact did not feel like a threat. It felt like a question. One the court that ruled 1,000 stars was no longer sure how to answer. The palace time lock finally released with a quiet ripple, like reality exhaling after holding its breath too long. Movement returned cautiously. No one rushed. No one spoke. Because the princess had just said something that did not exist in Zalari doctrine. She loosened her grip, only slightly, and turned her head toward the queen. Her bioluminescent markings dimmed into a steady, gentle glow, the kind usually seen only during deep restorative cycles. "She feels safe," she said. The translator hesitated, then repeated it. A murmur spread through the court, sharp and panicked. "That term is imprecise," an elder objected. "Safety is a condition, not a sensation," another added. The queen raised one hand, and silence obeyed. "Define your meaning," she said to her daughter. The princess thought for a moment, clearly struggling to shape the experience into words her people would accept. "When I am near him, my thoughts do not collide. They move together." Several officials recoiled as if struck. "That indicates neural interference, or contamination," another hissed. I cleared my throat. That was a mistake. 37 eyes immediately locked on to me. "For the record," I said,
This is how conversations normally start where I'm from. The queen ignored me. Her focus remained on her daughter. You are describing emotional synchronization. Yes, the princess replied, without command. That was worse. Zalari emotional states were regulated, initiated, and terminated by precise neural controls. To feel something without instruction was considered dangerous, primitive. The princess turned back to me. Your mind is untidy. Absolutely, I said. We try to keep it charming. She studied my face with open curiosity. But there is room in it. That phrase hit the court like a gravitational surge. Room? An elder echoed. For what? The princess answered without hesitation. For others. Silence followed. Thick, uncomfortable, ancient. The queen's fingers curled slowly at her side. Our empire was built to eliminate uncertainty. We engineered safety. The princess shook her head. You engineered quiet. That was when the empire truly trembled, because quiet had always been their ideal. Safety to the Zalari meant absence of fear, of unpredictability, of emotion. Yet here stood their future ruler, declaring that safety was not the absence of chaos, but the ability to exist within it. The queen finally looked at me. You, she said evenly, are insignificant by every metric we value. Fair, I replied. And yet, she continued, your daughter identifies you as stabilizing. I'm very good at sitting still, I offered. The princess corrected me gently. No, you are good at staying. That word, staying, spread faster than any alarm, because empires were built on control, but control had limits. And in that moment, the court that ruled 1,000 stars realized something profoundly unsettling. A human, chaotic, unremarkable, and entirely out of place had just introduced a concept they could not regulate. Safety that came from connection, not silence, not command. And once spoken aloud, it could never be taken back.
Zalari law was not debated. It was inherited. Each statute layered carefully atop the last, refined over tens of thousands of cycles, insulated against rebellion by logic so airtight it had never needed defending. Laws were not explained to children. They were absorbed. Which is why the court did not know how to respond when the princess asked a question. She finally loosened her hold on me, not completely, just enough to turn and face the queen fully. One of her hands still rested against my arm, as if anchoring herself to something solid while she spoke. Why, she asked calmly, is this forbidden? The word why echoed louder than any alarm. An elder reacted instantly. Because the law states, the queen raised a single finger. The elder fell silent. The queen studied her daughter for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was measured, precise. Contact with non-Zalari minds is restricted to prevent destabilization. The princess nodded. Destabilization of whom? A ripple passed through the court. The queen replied, of us. The princess looked around the chamber at the rigid officials, the frozen guards now pretending not to be unsettled, the glowing walls still struggling to recalibrate. You are already destabilized, she said simply. That landed badly. I winced on their behalf. One of the high jurists stepped forward, visibly tense. Child, the law exists to protect continuity. Emotion leads to disorder. The princess turned to him. Then why does order feel empty? That was it. That was the moment. No one shouted, no alarm sounded, but something foundational cracked, not audibly, but philosophically. The queen exhaled slowly. "Human," she said, without looking at me. "Did you teach her this?" I lifted both hands. "I teach adults basic emotional literacy back home. Children usually do better without my help." The princess tilted her head. "He did not teach me. He is." That somehow made it worse. The jurist recoiled. "Law is not shaped by presence." The princess faced him, unafraid. "Then it is fragile." Gasps, actual unrestrained gasps, escaped several delegates. The queen descended the final step of the dais. "For thousands of cycles, this empire has endured because we obey our laws without hesitation." The princess met her gaze. "And for thousands of cycles," she replied, "we have never asked if they were complete." Silence followed, deep and aching. I felt the weight of it pressing against my chest, harder than the hug ever had. The queen looked at her daughter, really looked at her, not as an heir or a variable, but as a mind forming its own questions. "Laws do not change because they are questioned," the queen said quietly. "No, they change because they are wrong." The word wrong hovered in the air like an unstable particle. No execution followed, no rebuke, just a realization spreading slowly through the court that something irreversible had happened. A child had not rebelled. She had reasoned. And in doing so, she had done what no enemy fleet ever could. She had forced an empire to look at its laws and wonder if obedience had replaced understanding.
The Zalari did not study humans right away. They observed them, from a distance, behind layers of safeguards and philosophical discomfort. Because now that the question had been asked, now that the word wrong had been spoken aloud, someone had to explain why a single human mind had disrupted systems perfected over millennia. That responsibility, unfortunately, landed on me. I stood in a smaller chamber hours later, surrounded by analysts, neural architects, and one very nervous translator. The princess sat nearby, legs folded awkwardly the way she'd seen humans do, watching with open curiosity. An elder gestured toward me. "Explain the contents of your cognition." I blinked. "All of it?" "Yes." I considered lying. Instead, I sighed. "Okay. Imagine several conversations happening at once. Add memories you didn't ask for, regrets that show up uninvited, random music, worry about people you love, fear of losing them, hope that things get better anyway." The translator paused, then repeated it. Several Zalari shifted uneasily. "That is inefficient," one analyst said. "Oh, absolutely. We hate it." Another leaned forward. "Why not suppress it?" I laughed before I could stop myself. "We try. It doesn't work." The princess's markings flickered softly. "Then why do you endure it?" I looked at her. "Because it's where we keep everyone else." The chamber fell quiet. I continued, voice steadier now. "Humans don't just think about themselves. We carry people with us, parents, friends, strangers we met once and never forgot.
We imagine how others feel even when we're wrong, especially when we're wrong. An analyst frowned. That sounds painful. It is, I said, but it's also how we recognize each other. The princess leaned closer. When I touched your thoughts, she said, there was noise, but there was also space. I nodded. That space is for empathy. It's messy. It overlaps. Sometimes it hurts. Why keep it? An elder demanded. Because without it, I said quietly, we stop caring who gets hurt. That answer didn't translate cleanly. The translator struggled, recalibrated, then tried again. This time, the silence lasted longer. The princess turned toward the elders. Their minds are loud because they are never alone. One of the neural architects stiffened. Isolation is optimal. For control, not for living. I watched realization ripple through the room. Not understanding, not yet, but curiosity. The dangerous kind. The kind that didn't shut down when faced with contradiction. An elder finally spoke. If humans carry this weight, why have they not collapsed? I smiled faintly. We do, constantly. The princess's eyes widened. Then how do you survive? I shrugged. We talk. We connect. Sometimes we hold on to each other when the universe gets overwhelming. She glanced at my hand, then at the elders. That, she said softly, is what I felt. No alarms triggered this time. No systems panicked. Instead, the Zalari faced a truth more destabilizing than invasion. Humans were not powerful despite their chaos. They were powerful because they carried it, because inside every human mind was a crowded, fragile, resilient place where others were allowed to exist. And once you noticed it, you couldn't unsee the emptiness of silence anymore. The Zalari Empire had never apologized. Not to enemies, not to allies, not to history. Apology implied error, and error implied imperfection. Imperfection was something lesser civilizations struggled with. The Zalari had simply optimized past it. Until a child made them stop optimizing. The Grand Assembly reconvened under conditions no record had ever described. Uncertainty. No protocols were triggered, no dominance displays activated. The palace lights dimmed into neutral tones, undecided, mirroring the mood of the empire itself. I stood at the edge again, where humans apparently belonged, while the princess sat beside the queen, not behind her, not beneath her, but with her. That alone unsettled half the court. An elder spoke first. We have reviewed the data. The human's presence does not destabilize the air. Another added reluctantly, it appears to stabilize her. Murmurs rippled. That is unacceptable, one official snapped. Stability must originate internally. The queen rose. Every conversation died instantly. For thousands of cycles, we have demanded control of ourselves and others. We believed this made us superior. She turned slowly, deliberately, and faced her daughter. And yet, she continued, we were unprepared for a question. The princess met her gaze, unafraid. The queen stepped down from the dais. Gasps escaped before discipline could stop them. She descended all the way to the floor of the court, where delegates stood, where lesser beings waited, where power was never meant to kneel. Then she knelt. Not to me, to her daughter. The sound of her knee touching the crystal floor echoed louder than any declaration of war. "I do not understand this path," she said, "but I acknowledge it exists." The princess reached out and placed her hand over her mother's. "I will not dismantle our empire," she said gently. "I will expand it." The queen turned her gaze to me for the second time that day. "Human," she said, "your species disrupts equilibrium." "We're kind of known for that," I replied. "And yet," she continued, "you have shown us something we could not simulate." "Connection?" I offered. She nodded once. "Then," she said, rising slowly, "the Zilari Empire will adapt." That word, adapt, spread faster than fear ever had. Trade laws were amended, cultural exchanges authorized, neural dampening protocols revised, not removed, but questioned. Not dismantled, balanced. The empire did not fall. It bent. And in doing so, it became something it had never planned to be. Alive. The princess leaned toward me and whispered, "Is this what kneeling feels like to humans?" I considered that. "No," I said. "This is what standing together feels like." For the first time in its history, the Zilari Empire did something unprecedented. It listened. And somewhere between control and chaos, an empire learned that strength did not always come from standing above others. Sometimes, it came from choosing to meet them at eye level.
Empires usually announce change loudly. Declarations, broadcasts, ceremonies filled with symbols meant to be remembered. The Zilari did none of that. There was no galactic transmission proclaiming reform, no official apology encoded into law, no admission that anything fundamental had shifted. Instead, a message was sent, quietly. I discovered it weeks later, back aboard a Terran transport vessel drifting between star systems, when my personal console chimed with a priority signal I didn't recognize. No insignia, no encryption warnings, just a simple Zilari relay stamp. I opened it cautiously. The message contained no data stream, no legal text, no political framing, only words. I am practicing being less quiet. I stared at the screen for a long moment, unsure whether to laugh or feel something dangerously close to awe. The captain glanced over from her seat. Good news or bad? Complicated, which usually means good later. Across the galaxy, similar messages reached other worlds, not to governments, but to individuals. Human mediators, alien scholars, trade delegates, even a few civilian channels. Short phrases, imperfect translations. We are listening. We are curious. Teach us how you stay. The Zilari Empire hadn't rewritten its laws yet, but it had rewritten its posture. Back on their home world, the palace had changed too. The crystalline arches no longer reacted only to emotional suppression. They shifted gently now, responding to variance instead of resisting it. Neural dampeners were still used, but with optional ranges. Control was no longer absolute. Choice had been introduced. The princess often sat at the edge of the great hall, speaking with diplomats who once avoided eye contact. Sometimes she said very little. Sometimes she asked uncomfortable questions. Always she listened. Once per cycle, without fail, I received another message. Never long, never formal. I spoke today without preparing. I felt uncertain. I did not retreat. I remembered your noise. I replied when I could. So did others. And slowly, something extraordinary happened. These Ilari were no longer feared for their perfection. They were respected for their willingness to change. The galaxy didn't erupt into chaos. Trade didn't collapse. No wars followed. Instead, conversations grew longer. Pauses became acceptable. Silence, when it arrived, felt chosen, not enforced. Years later, long after my assignment officially ended, a final message arrived. No signature, just one sentence. I am still safe. I leaned back in my chair, staring out at the scatter of stars beyond the viewport, each one a reminder of how vast, how indifferent the universe could be. And yet, somewhere among them, an empire had learned a simple and profound thing. That safety was not built from walls or laws or silence. It was built when someone, somewhere, decided to reach out, and another chose to stay. The message faded from my screen, but its echo carried on, quietly traveling across the stars, reshaping worlds not with force, but with connection.